Savvy Storage Saving Swifters, it's Prof G, and in our last lesson, part 1, we set up cloud storage for Firebase for our app, created a model to save photo data to Cloud Firestore, and wrote a save function to both save an image to cloud storage and save data for accessing and describing that data to Cloud Firestore. We'll finish things off in this lecture by modifying the Snacktacular app so that we have a view that shows the user's image selection, allowing for the entry of a description, and which then can call the view model to actually save the image and its related data. Let's learn big and finish off our image saving. Let's start by creating a photo view that will show the image the user selects from the image picker, something we did 2 lessons back. Now I'll add this below the review view, so I'll right-click on review view, select new file. This is a SwiftUI view, and we'll name this photo view. And we'll place this view's content in a navigation stack. Inside this, we'll add a VStack. Then inside that, we'll start with a spacer, and then add an image. And here we're going to select the option with UI image, and we're going to pass in a value that we call UI image as well, but we haven't created that value, so up top we'll add var UI image : capital UI image, and UI image is imported with SwiftUI, so we don't need to import the UI kit here. Make sure you get the caps correct. I've used lowercase UI, capital I image for the variable name, and the type is capital U, capital I image. Now, if you wonder why I didn't create this as a state value, that's because I'm not changing the image from this screen, so there's no reason for it to have a varying state. And I didn't initialize this value so I can pass the UI image over from our spot detail view after it's been selected using the photos picker. Then I'll add a spacer below the image, and I'll add 2 modifiers to the image, .resizable and .scale to fit. Below the bottom spacer, I'll enter a text field so that the user can enter a description. I'll select the option with title key and text. I'll make the title just the string description, and for the text, well, that's going to be a property and a value that's of type photo, that struct that we created in the previous lesson. So up top we'll say @state private var photo, lowercase, equals capital P photo, open and close parens. Then down below in the text field's text, this needs to be a binding variable, so we'll start with $photo.description. And we'll add a modifier below this, .text field style, passing in .rounded border. Now below this, I'll add a text view that shows who posted it and on what date. So we'll pass into the text view the string by : string interp space on : string interp. And in the first string interp, we'll pass in photo.reviewer, and in the second string interp, we'll pass in photo.postedOn. Now posted_on is a date type, so let's format that with the .formatted modifier. So this is applied to a date type, it returns a string, we pass in a date and time style, the date style will be .numeric, and the time style will be .omitted. No reason for the time to be posted. We'll make sure that text line appears on one line by adding a .line limit modifier passing in 1, and .minimum scale factor passing in 0.5, and below the VStack closing curly, we'll pass in .padding with nothing between the parens. And forgive me, I should have done this before, I should have modified the preview provider so that we can see what's showing up on the right-hand side in live preview. I'll backspace over this. Now this wants a UI image. Just for the preview provider, why don't we give it a special image from our asset catalog? Now you don't have to use my food images, but if you'd like to use the images in here so you can follow along and have images of food in this food-related app that you're building, I've got a bunch of images that you can use for testing this app in a folder called Food Images. You'll find these in the public Google Drive that you'll find at bit.ly/prof-g-swiftui-files. They're all in a folder called Food Images. You can right-click on that and download it if you'd like. I've already downloaded that, so what I'm going to do is head to my asset catalog, and inside the food images folder that I've downloaded, I'll find pizza, spelled all in lowercase, drag it over into the asset catalog that has a nice image of a pepperoni pizza, sorry vegetarians, and back in the preview provider for the photo view, I'm going to pass in selecting UI image, that's capital U, capital I, capital image. This is going to create an initializer. I'm going to select the option with named. This will grab an image from the asset catalog that has the same name as any string that I put in here, so I'll enter the string pizza. Now this UI image initializer might return a nil value. It shouldn't, but I'm going to put in a double question mark after here and select UI image with empty parentheses, just to silence any error. Then I'll resume live preview. This is actually going to take a while to start up. The first time I refreshed the preview, it took about a minute before this showed up, but you'll eventually see our view layout. Looking good. I didn't create a photo value, so I don't see anything in for the by value down below, but I do see the date formatted numerically with no time after it. Nice. And my scheme is on the smaller iPhone 13 mini. You can keep that, although I'm going to switch mine to iPhone 14 Pro so I can see what the layout looks like on my current phone. And while I'm waiting for the preview to refresh, I'm going to add a toolbar modifier. We want to add cancel and save buttons in here, pressing return for trailing closure curlies. And inside, I'll add a toolbar item view, selecting the option with placement and content, holding down the option when pressing return so that both of these parameters are entered. And this first toolbar item is going to be a cancel button. So the placement is going to be .cancellation action, tab over and press return on the content for trailing content closure. And in here, I'll add a button with title and action. The title is going to be cancel. Then I'll tab over and press return on the action closure. And here I need a dismiss environment variable. So I'll scroll to the top and add @environment between parens, passing in \dismiss. Outside the parens, adding private var dismiss. Then for the cancel button action, I can enter dismiss with parens after it. Don't forget the parens. Common mistake to forget those parens. They don't show up automatically. Then below this toolbar item, I'll add another toolbar item. This is going to also have placement and content, so I'll hold down the option key when pressing return to get both parameters. Placement is going to be .automatic, tab, press return for the content closure. And in here, I'm going to enter a button with title and action as well. The title is going to be the string save, and I'll tab and press return on the action closure. And here is where we're going to call our saveImage function, which we wrote in the spot view model in the last lecture. Now, this is an await function, so we need to put this inside of a capital T task block between the open and close curlies. And to call this, we need to set up our spot view model as an environment object in this view. So up top, we'll add @environment object. We've already declared this as a state object in a prior view, and we've injected this into the view hierarchy. So we follow this simply with var lowercase spot capital V capital M colon spot view model, but no parens after this type here. We're just declaring the type. We're not initializing it. And we need to go down here to the preview provider to add a .environment object modifier, passing in an initialized capital spot, capital V view, capital M model with open and close parens here. So we initialize this type that we pass in, and now we can call our saveImage method in the task. It returns a bool indicating if it's successful. So let's say let success equals await spot VM dot save image, and let's see, we need a spot value for this, but we haven't set this up. So we're going to be passing this in from the spot detail view. Up top, we'll simply say var spot colon capital S spot for the type, but we're not going to initialize this. Remember, we're passing this value in, and since this is not changing, we don't need this to be a state property wrapped value. And the preview provider is now grumpy because we're not passing in a spot. I'm going to cut out this business with a UI image, and then I'll backspace over and re-enter my photo view. I can paste in the UI view image stuff that I just copied. I still want to pass that parameter in, but over here under spot, I'll initialize or create a new spot value with capital S spot, open close parens. Then back up in our call to spotvm.saveImage, I can pass in the lowercase spot, tab over, pass in lowercase photo, tab over, and pass in lowercase UI image. I've got all those values. Now, if this is successful, if success, open and close curlies, we'll simply dismiss, open and close parens. And that's it for the photo view for now, so let's head back over to the spot detail view and call this photo view after we select an image using the photo picker. So remember, over here in spot detail view, we have an onChange modifier after the photo picker. You can see the warning we've got highlighted in yellow because we weren't using the UI image that we got from the photo picker. Well, we're about to use it. And this view is getting a bit complicated, and I think that's why my version of Xcode is fussy. So it's a good idea to enter the code until you've got enough lines to render in live preview, then take a moment just to make sure that everything renders properly with no errors. If you have complex views like this one, I've noticed that Xcode still doesn't provide reliable error reporting for SwiftUI, but if you work line by line, if things aren't rendering when you've got enough code entered to render, then you can examine the last things that you'd entered to see if you've got any errors. If there are no errors, you should be seeing things in the preview provider. Now, one of the things I want to do in here is I want to pay attention to which button was pressed, either the rate or review button or the photo button. And the reason for that is if I haven't yet saved a spot, I'm going to present an alert asking the user if they want to save data. We did that in an earlier lesson, but now since we might either save data and head to the review view or save data and head to the photo view, if the photo button is pressed, then we need to keep track of which button is pressed so we can call the appropriate view. Now, to do this cleanly, I want to create an enum that includes case options for if the review or the photo button was tapped. We could simply use a string or a bool flag, but I think an enum makes our code more readable. So up top, we'll add enum button pressed, curlies, case, review, comma, photo. Then we'll create a state variable that can hold the case that was selected. I'll add it below the showing as sheet since it's also related to showing alerts in sheets. That's just to keep the related variable definitions close together in my code. And I'll say @state private var lower camel case button pressed equals, and why don't we initialize this as well to capital B button pressed, that's the enum that we just created, .review. So again, the reason that we're doing this is if I click on the button in the preview provider, like the review button here, I'm currently being asked if I want to save the unsaved spot. You only see this alert if the spot hasn't been saved. I'll cancel this right now, and let's record which button was pressed. So down here in the save button, that's the one with the star fill and the text save, as the first line in the button action, we'll add button pressed equals .review. Then we'll do the same in the action for the photo picker when we selected an image, and that shows up in the onChange modifier. Remember, we're not using a button here, so we don't have a button action, but this code in onChange is the action that's performed if the image has been selected. So now I'm going to delete my to-do comment in here, and I'm going to need to access the UI image that was selected outside of the onChange closure. You see the let UI image that I've got up here? Well, that's created as a local variable, and it actually only exists between this first set of if curlies in here. So we'd say the UI image's scope is local to this if statement. But I'm going to need to access this outside of that set of curlies. I'm going to need to use it in the sheet that's going to present the photo view so I can pass the value that was selected into the photo view. So I need to create a view-wide variable to hold this let constant for this UI image that was just selected. And I'll give it this name UI image selected, which I started to type in, but it's not recognized because I haven't created that variable yet. So up top, I'm going to create a new value. I'll add this right under my button pressed value, and I'll say @state private var UI image selected is what I'll call this, and I'll set this equal to UI image, the type here, and I'll initialize this with open and close curlies, so it's an empty UI image. But back down in the onChange modifier where we just were, where the yellow warning line was, we'll get rid of the yellow warning line by using UI image selected, just as I typed it in earlier. Now it's declared, and we'll set this equal to UI imaged. So what we've done essentially is hand off this local variable UI image to a view-wide, more global variable called UI image selected. And I can see my live preview has refreshed with no errors. Slow Xcode confirms all is good. And below the code I just entered, I'll also enter button pressed equals .photo. Now below this, I'm going to check to see if the current spot that I'm viewing has been saved or if it's a new spot. And if it's a new spot, then we need to prompt the user with an alert asking them if they want to save that spot or cancel. The code we're going to enter is just like the code that we use down here in the button action for the review button. So after we set button pressed equals to .photo, we'll say if spot.id double equals nil, open and close curlies. And we're going to have an else option with open and close curlies in here too. And in the if clause, we'll say show save alert dot toggle. This is going to show the alert asking the user if they want to save the spot or cancel. And in the false case, oh, I'm starting to type in show photo view, but I haven't created a variable to show the photo view as a sheet yet. See how we have a show review sheet dot toggle down here for the review button action? We need the same to show a sheet containing the photo view. So up top, I'll create a bool below show review sheet with @state private var show photo sheet, and I'll set this equal to false. Then let's head back down to the else clause that's empty that we just created, and we'll say show photo sheet dot toggle. So we now see this if block action for the photo button action looks similar to the if block action for the review or rate button action. And the code is getting kind of complicated here, so feel free to take a breath and trace through the code in your mind to be sure you understand what you're entering. You really want to make sure that you understand the code that you're writing and not just copying along with a video without gaining understanding. Sometimes this means you need to rewatch a section or put in some print statements as your code executes. Do whatever you need to make sure that you're gaining an understanding as you're following along. Sometimes it takes some time to make sure you're getting it, but there are no shortcuts to being a good developer. And now let's create a sheet modifier to present a sheet if we want to show that photo view. So I'll do this down here below the sheet modifier for show review sheet. That's the one above the alert. And I'll say .sheet, selecting this option with is presented and content. We don't need the dimmed out on dismiss, so we don't need to hold down option here when we press return. And the binding value we'll pass in is $show photo sheet. We'll tab over and press return for the content closure. And it's weird. For some reason, Xcode isn't formatting this sheet is presented code exactly like the sheet is presented code above. This formatting will work, but just to keep things looking consistent, I'm going to delete the comma content colon here and replace this with the closing paren, and I can then delete the trailing paren down here just before the trailing curly. So now this call to the sheet modifier has the same syntax formatting as the one above it. It wasn't necessary, but I like things to look consistent. And in here, we also need a navigation stack, open and close curlies, and inside we can now call photo view. But again, Xcode is acting squirrely. For some reason, it's showing that I need to pass in a value for spot VM and for dismiss. I don't need to do that. So the spot VM is my environment object. We set that up fine. I don't need that here. So I'm going to delete this first parameter, spot VM with a comma. But my UI image is going to be UI image selected. Remember, that's that view wide property that we passed in from the local variable in the if let above. Spot is going to be spot. Again, Xcode is weird. I should not have the dismiss variable here, so we can just highlight the dismiss variable with the comma, delete that, and things refresh in live preview with no errors, so we've entered code correctly. Now, there are a couple more things we need to deal with. This first one, actually, we're not going to deal with it right now, but I want to show you what's coming up. If we look down here in the alert, we have this line here with a comment that says, if we didn't update the path after the spot, we wouldn't be able to show the reviews that were added. Well, what we're going to need is a similar line in here. So I'm going to highlight the $review.path line, copy it, and paste it below, and change it so that it reads $photos.path equals, and the path string is spots / whatever the spot.id is in the string interp. Remember, at this point, that would mean that we've just saved the spot, so now we have a spot ID where we didn't have it before, and after that, /photos. Now we're going to get an error because we haven't created a photos variable that's a Firestore query value. We do have that for reviews, so I'm just going to write a to-do comment above this that says add photos, and I'm going to comment out the $photos.path line here for now. We are going to set up that path variable, but we'll wait until we've got save working properly. We'll do that in the next video. Now, one thing we do want to do here is that if we just saved the spot, meaning this was a brand new spot, then we're either going to show the review view or the photos view sheet. So let's create a switch statement to handle this. We'll switch on button pressed, open and close curlies, then inside we'll say case.review : and the other case is case.photo : and for the review case, well, we want to toggle the review sheet on. That's this line right here. So I can cut that out and paste that under the review case, and then under the photo case, we'll have show photo view sheet.toggle. And now we're ready to try this out. So let's build and run. Hammer time, no errors. I've reset my simulator, so my app is acting as if it was just installed for the very first time on this device. So I'm seeing this ask if it's okay to use the app's location. I will say yes, allow this while we're using the app. And I'll log in, and I'm going to look at Pino's Pizza, and if I click on to add a photo, I'm just seeing the default nature pics that are included with the simulator. But if you want to try out the real food rating experience, you can add the images from the food images folder that I'd shown earlier on in this lesson. If you've downloaded that, let me show you how you can add the images into the simulator so you can find them in the image library. I'm going to keep the images showing here, but then I'm going to head back to the Finder. I'm going to open my food images folder that I downloaded earlier. I'll highlight and select all the images with Command A. Then I'll drag and drop them into the simulator with the images showing, and this opens a few screens in the Photos app. I'll click Allow and then Continue. And let's see, I want to get back to the app. I always forget how to do this. If I click on Files in the upper left, that just takes me to this screen, not what I want. Browse doesn't do it. If I double click on the home button, that pulls up the app selector. Now I can click back on the Snacktacular app, which is running, and look at this. All of those pictures we just dragged over are now in the app, and they'll continue to be in this version of the simulator unless we go up under the simulator's device menu and select erase all content in settings. So these images are in my iPhone 14 Pro simulator, but if I switch the scheme to another iPhone to simulate, the images wouldn't be in that simulated iPhone. They're just in the simulated phone that I dragged them into. So with all these pictures here, why don't I find, how about this picture of a Sicilian pie up top? I'll click on that, and this opens the photo view that we just set up. That's what we hope would happen. Very nice. And before I enter a description and save this, let's head over and take a look at what's happening in the cloud. So I'm in the Firebase console. In the Firestore database here, I've clicked on the spot document for Pino's Pizza. That's the same spot that I'm about to add a photo to. And right now I see that I've got a reviews collection, but I don't yet have a photos collection. So back to the app, I'll enter the description as square slices. And also note that the text field at the bottom has the email of the person that's logged in and the date. Nice. So now I'll click on the save button and the view dismissed, suggesting that the save image was successful, and we don't see anything happening in the console. No photos collection is showing, but let's refresh the browser. And hey, look at that. Now we've got a photos collection. Let's click it. We see a photo document here is added in what looks like the UUID, and that's what it's done. Remember, we did that in the save item function that's in our spot view model. That was done in the previous lesson. So let's click on this, and we see all the properties of this photo. So square slices is the description. We see the reviewer's email, the posted on date, and we also see the image URL string, which we'll eventually use to load the image back into our app. But for now, let's head over to the storage console. Click on storage in the upper left, and you see this little folder here? So this has the same unique name as the spot for Pino's Pizza. So inside of this folder is where we're going to store all of the images that have been saved for Pino's Pizza. So click on this folder. Here we see the file with the same UUID that was in Cloud Firestore. Let's click this name, and we see it load over on the right. We've got this image in cloud storage now. It loads in the browser so we can preview it because we added metadata in our save image function, which we did in the last lesson. Congratulations, you are now saving images to cloud storage and related information for that image in Cloud Firestore. Solid advanced skills, you full stack meister. Now let's head back to the Firestore database. We'll look at photos, and then we'll head back to the app and we'll add another photo. So I'll click the photo button, and I'll click this other square pizza that's below the first one. It shows up in the photo view. Let's add a description. How about Sicilian pie? And we'll save this. And I didn't even need to refresh the console. We can see that we've got a second document in the photos collection. Back in the app, let's click on photo again. This time I'll select this round cheese pie. Description, yummy cheese, click save again, and we see a third document in the photos collection. Add a fourth one. How about this sad pie? I'll describe it as sad pizza, click save. Fourth document shows up in the photos collection. Let's take a look over at the storage console. We can click on this folder, and we see we've got 4 images here for the 4 images that we've added to Pino's Pizza. You can click on each of these going down, and we'll see the image loaded, courtesy of the fact that we saved this with the metadata equal to image/JPG. Let's take a look at things back in Firestore database. And I'll click on this second spot document here. This one is for Shake Shack. Then let's head back to the app, head back to the list of spots. I'm going to click on Shake Shack and click on photo. I'll click on this photo here, put in the description, Lobster Mac, a Boston specialty. Actually, I don't think this is the right picture, but our local Shake Shack does have lobster-topped burgers in the summertime. So if I click on save, the view closes. If I refresh this screen, we now see Shake Shack does have a photos collection. Click it, we see a photo document with all the properties that we just added. Head back to storage. Now we see 2 folders in here, one for each of the spots that has a photos collection. If we click this one, that's Pino's Pizza. We see all 4 images saved for Pino's Pizza. But if I click next to this link icon here in the breadcrumb trail, we see our 2 folders again. And if I click on that second folder, it's my Shake Shack folder. It has the same name as the spot ID for Shake Shack. We see there's 1 image in here, and if we click on it, we see that picture that we just saved. Very nice! Swifter, I hope that you're feeling like the Swifty legend that you are fastly becoming. Now that we've got image saving down, in the next lesson, we're going to learn how we can load in the images and display them in a horizontally scrolling list in our app. Continue to hack!